Stevie Nicks has never been one to follow the protocol of others. Absolutely not in her music, in her relationships, and most certainly not in the manner that she expresses her thoughts and feelings. But at the age of 76, the icon of Fleetwood Mac accomplished something that fans had never anticipated. She disclosed in a stealthy manner the 7 musicians whom she simply could not tolerate. There were those who caused her heart to break, others that caused her soul to clash, and a few that simply over the line. It's not merely a matter of petty grudges or gossip from the tabloids. Betrayal, backstage brawls, and years of unresolved tension are the foundations upon which these stories are built. The names, on the other hand, will take you by surprise, since once Stevie destroys a bridge, there is no turning back. So who was at the top of the list, and what exactly took place behind the scenes of the music? Lindsey Buckingham, the fire that blazed with heat that was too intense. Together, they did more than just create music. They also created fire. However, what started out as one of the most captivating romances in rock gradually turned into a battle that was slowly raging within them. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were never simply bandmates. They were more than that. They were a raging ordeal, stunning, perilous, and impossible to contain all at the same time. Stevie saw something else, but the fans saw passion in each other. She claims that he has harbored resentment for her dominance from the very beginning. Despite the fact that their relationship ended at the same time as Fleetwood Mac's became famous, they continued to engage in a creative tug-of-war for many years. Every phrase changed into a blade, and every performance turned into a battleground. In songs such as Dreams, Stevie put her anguish into the music. Lindsey retaliated with his own musical jabs, and the band did nothing except stand in the center and watch as 2 legends tore each other apart in slow motion. After some time had passed, Stevie would assert that Lindsey had attempted to undermine her in both her personal and professional life. During the practices, he made fun of her lyrics. On stage, he smiled and rolled his eyes. He was adamant about rewriting her songs so that they would match his idea. In spite of this, she remained till she couldn't. In 2018, Lindsey was terminated from her position at Fleetwood Mac, and the decision was not made in a hushed boardroom meeting. An ultimatum was presented by Stevie. He will either leave or she will leave. This was the band's choice. The statement that she made was that I would no longer be bullied. It was not by someone who had no interest in my accomplishments. That moment was more than simply a moment of closure for Stevie. It was an act of vengeance. However, Lindsey was not the only man who left her hurt, since the subsequent man broke her heart in a completely different way from the one she had previously experienced. She has prevented him from ever forgetting it. The love that left scars was that of Don Henley. He made reference to her as the one who escaped. She referred to him as a mistake that she just could not afford to make again. It was more than simply a celebrity romance when Stevie Nicks ended up falling in love with Don Henley of the Eagles. It was a rendezvous between egos, celebrity, and heartbreak that was just waiting to take place. On the surface, they appeared to be 2 music heavyweights who clearly had chemistry with one another. However, Stevie claims that behind the scenes, Don was looking for something from her that she was unable to provide. In command, through late hours, extensive tours, and competing ideals, they were able to fuel their relationship, which was passionate but difficult. The most agonizing part of the story was when Stevie discovered that she was carrying his child into the world. Stevie had other hopes for her, but Don anticipated that she would eventually become the kind of woman who would be able to integrate into his world, start a family, and settle down. By deciding to pursue her job rather than a life she was not prepared for, she terminated the pregnancy. Stevie never forgot how he tried to rewrite her tale in interviews, portraying himself as the broken-hearted victim. Don never forgave her for it, and Stevie never forgot how he tried to do in interviews. She once stated that he desired to take ownership of the story. However, I was never going to be someone's last-minute consideration. It wasn't only an emotional breakup between them. It became a representation of everything that Stevie would not compromise on about his beliefs. Love, without a doubt, but not at the expense of her independence. If you think it was a terrible way to end things, you should wait till you hear who came next, and someone whose mere presence ignited a fire within Stevie Nicks that has not yet been extinguished until this day. It is Courtney Love. Both chaos and control are present. Even though Stevie Nicks had been through storms in the past, she was not prepared for the hurricane that was Courtney Love. It wasn't just a clash of personalities that occurred when these two rock giants came into contact with one another. A full-scale ideological conflict was taking place. Courtney was everything that Stevie, who was known for being a mystical poet who possessed discipline and grace, cautioned young women in the music industry to steer clear of. Irresponsible, uncensored, and perpetually on the verge of destroying themselves. During the 90s, Courtney made a few remarks in which she dismissed Fleetwood Mac as being safe and overhyped. This was the beginning of everything. Insiders claim that Stevie was furious, but she did not respond publicly to the issue. Then there was the incident that took place behind the scenes at a tribute performance in Los Angeles. Courtney, who was reportedly intoxicated and audible, entered Stevie's dressing room without being invited. Keeping his professionalism intact, Stevie requested that she depart. The confrontation that ensued was a tense standoff, during which Stevie stared her down and uttered the one word, "Enough." It was reported by witnesses that the atmosphere in that room became eerily calm, as if something holy had been disturbed. According to reports, Courtney started laughing, and then stormed off while yelling a few inappropriate comments that cannot be repeated. Stevie didn't go after her on the chase. She merely shut the door and asked for her name to be removed from the collection of winning entries. She made it abundantly obvious that evening. Although Chaos may be successful in selling albums, it does not earn respect. Beginning at that point, Stevie made it quite plain. When it came to revolt disguised as anarchy, she had no sympathy for it. Her perception of Courtney was that she exemplified everything that was wrong with the way the music industry glamorized devastation. It was also stated that she used a microphone to call her a cautionary tale behind closed doors. However, that was not the last time that Stevie had a disagreement with a courageous female figure. As a matter of fact, the subsequent one did not merely challenge her. She put Stevie in a position where he questioned the very future of music. The queen without a crown, that would be Madonna. A shadow is not something that Stevie Nicks does lightly. However, when it came to Madonna, she did not hold back in any regards. Stevie believes that the ascension of the Queen of Pop represented more than just a shift in cultural norms. It served as a cautionary indicator. According to a statement that she made to a friend at one point, it became more about shock than soul, and that's when I knew we were losing something. Over the course of her career, Stevie had devoted her time composing lyrics that were beautiful, private, and spiritual. On the other hand, Madonna developed her empire through a combination of image construction, provocation, and reinvention. When the two ultimately met at a party for the business in the late 1980s, Stevie was apparently not impressed with the encounter. The entire performance took place offstage, and Madonna was surrounded by dancers, stylists, flashing cameras, and photographers. It was Stevie who approached to make her introduction. Not even Madonna looked up at the sky. In the later hours of that day, Stevie is said to have informed a fellow musician that wasn't a woman, that seemed to be a machine. She was of the opinion that Madonna had attempted to transform sensitivity into a costume and sincerity into a brand strategy. Stevie did not feel covetous. She was dissatisfied with the outcome. To a certain extent, the industry had begun to prioritize spectacle over content, and in her eyes, Madonna was the embodiment of that transformation. One day, she stated that there was no longer any mystery. There was no longer any significance to anything because everything was exposed. That little moment remained in her mind. Later on, Stevie referred to her as a brand rather than a voice, and she privately admitted that she believed Madonna had emptied the meaning of femininity and filled it with packaging. Never again did the two women exchange words. On the other hand, Stevie wasn't just attacking a famous singer. A change in music that left her feeling empty was causing her to grieve. This change would come back to haunt her when she found herself working, even for a short period of time, with an artist whose brilliance was on par with her own, and whose ego was so enormous that it almost brought her down. The Prince, insanity and magic collide. Sparks are to be expected whenever two legends come face to face. However, when Stevie Nicks and Prince attempted to work together that did not result in any sparks. There was no motion. He was once described by her as otherworldly, a musical power that was beyond anything she had ever experienced before. However, there was something else that was hidden underneath the admiration, scared. It wasn't because of who he was, but rather because of what he showed her. The little red Corvette was the beginning of their story. Stevie was completely enamored with the song, and she really drew inspiration for her famous song, Stand Back, from its groove. Because she wanted to show Prince respect, she called him and begged for permission. Not only did he respond positively, but he visited the recording studio on the same evening, played the keyboard parts, and then disappeared as if he had never been there. Even though Stevie was in amazement, that was also the last time that everything went off without a hitch. After some time had passed, Prince expressed interest in working together once more. However, this time, he demanded that the collaboration be conducted on his own terms, and his requirements were very stringent. He forwarded her a tape that contained only music and no vocals or lyrics, and he anticipated that she would finish it. Stevie went completely numb. As time went on, she admitted that it was too intense. It seemed as though I was being dragged into a location that I was not prepared to go to. The call from Prince was never returned, and she declined. Stevie spoke of him with reverence throughout the course of many years after he had passed away. However, the strain that was present in her voice was still audible. It was true that the magic existed, but so was the control. Stevie, on the other hand, was never one to enjoy being told what to do, not even by a brilliant mind. The subsequent conflict, however, was not with a genius. Stevie was with a rock artist whose volume was so loud that it completely overpowered everything that Stevie thought music should be. This Dave Grohl is too loud to listen to. While Stevie Nicks is not easily scared by energy, she is extremely sensitive to ego that is disguised as excitement. She believed that she had discovered a person who shared her values and beliefs when she first met Dave Grohl. In almost every sector of the music industry, he was revered for his passion, his prolific output, and his respect. But as soon as they attempted to collaborate, things began to fall apart at a rate that was comparable to a drum solo by the Foo Fighters. An informal studio session was held, and Stevie was invited to participate in the jam session together with Dave and a few other artists. She was anticipating a creative conversation. As far as people who were near to her are concerned, what she received was a wall of sound and no space at all. In every beat, every riff, and every discourse, Grohl was the dominant force. In response to Stevie's suggestion that the song be played at a slower tempo, or that the lyrics be altered, Dave laughed it off and turned up the volume. In a later conversation, she revealed that she had the sensation of being yelled out of the room. The performance came to an abrupt stop when Stevie left in the middle of the song, uttering just the words, "This isn't music, it's noise." There has been no official conflict between them up until this point. Fans have observed that she has not once addressed Grohl in any of the interviews that she has given since then. A silence like that speaks volumes, especially coming from someone as outspoken as Stevie. On the other hand, her next target was neither a rocker or a competitor. A pop juggernaut whose brilliance she could not deny, but whose presence she could not stand, was the subject of this statement. Aguilera, Christina, with her entire voice and no inhibitions. At first, it was not a personal matter. In no way did Stevie Nicks have any animosity against pop stars, and he was certainly not against talent. That was something that Christina Aguilera had in abundance. When Stevie saw her perform live for the first time, however, she did not witness any artistry. She heard a commotion. She is said to have informed a close friend that there is a distinction between singing and showing off. Further, I do not have the patience to wait for the second. The tension reached its peak during a tribute performance that was broadcast on television and in which Stevie and Christina were both scheduled to appear. Stevie's expectation was that the evening would be devoted to commemorating ladies who had paved the way for future generations. Stevie later described Christina's performance as a vocal acrobatic routine. Instead, she remained silent as she watched Christina hit high note after high note, transforming a poignant song into a vocal acrobatic routine, according to insiders. Stevie completely avoided Christina behind the scenes, and he eventually left the show before the conclusion. It was stated that she told her colleagues, "It's like being in a room with someone who is yelling compliments at you. It is a full-time job." It wasn't pop music that Stevie had a problem with. extremism, ego, and the notion that volume is equivalent to emotion were the factors that led to this. And in Christina, she saw the same thing that she had spent her entire career fighting against, a feeling that she had been trying to avoid. However, despite the fact that Stevie has forgiven the majority of her past, there is one thing that she has never ceased doing, and that is remembering. On top of that, it wasn't just about the people she detested in the end. It all came down to the revelations that those rivalries made about her. Never in his life did Stevie Nicks intend to cause a feud. However, when you have spent decades working in a field that is founded on competitiveness, egos, and show, it becomes impossible to avoid conflict. Lindsey Buckingham, Don Henley, Courtney Love, Madonna, Prince, Dave Grohl, and Christina Aguilera were the 7 artists with whom she had a disagreement. Each of these artists represented more than simply his or her own personal differences. In addition to being mirrors, they served as triggers, cautions, and occasionally cautionary tales. In Stevie's eyes, they were more than just resentments. Heartbreak, defiance, and the raw cost of remaining true to oneself were the lessons that were imprinted into their hearts permanently. Every experience she had left an imprint, not only on her music but also on the person she evolved into. Whether it was love that turned into hatred or admiration that collapsed into disillusionment, each contact left a trace. Despite everything that happened, she never lost her ability to speak. Not in the recording studio, not on stage, and not when the industry attempted to confine her to a certain sphere. Stevie Nicks did not only survive the rock and roll industry, rather, she did it by rewriting the rules. Tell us which of these names startled you the most and why, and do you believe that Stevie made the correct decision by speaking her truth despite the consequences? If you want to hear more stories like this one that have never been told before, click the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Whenever there is music, there is always more to it, and there are certain mysteries that are just beginning to come to light.